2009 BMW 328i. This is an X-Drive 3-liter engine, misfire cylinder number 3, and Vanos codes. I tracked it down to a bad ignition coil. This is the one that came out. This is just a spare that I had used, but I know it's a good coil. Obviously they are slightly different, but as soon as I plug that in, the misfire goes away and the power is back. I went a little further and I removed the spark plugs, and there's almost no central electrode left on these plugs. They're so worn out. I put a feeler gauge on it, and this thing is kind of hard to do with one hand, but let's see. Goes all the way to 80 thousandths of an inch. That thing is toast. You can see the center electrode is like completely worn out. To put it in perspective, I have some plugs that I replaced in the trash, but just look at the difference of the electrodes from the plug on the left to the plug on the right. Again, this is kind of hard to do with one hand, but I think you get the idea. You see that? This is a used plug that I actually replaced. This one came from the trash, and this one has a nice solid center electrode. This is the one that came out of the BMW. It's almost gone. So I would recommend replacing all these spark plugs, and usually when one coil fails, the other 5 are very close behind because they're all the same age. They were all exposed to the same running conditions. So I would recommend changing all 6 coils and all 6 spark plugs. While I have the engine exposed, I'm just gonna give you a glimpse of the oil leakage. That's called a football gasket. It's a Valvetronic motor gasket. You can see it's all covered in grime. This is the eccentric shaft sensor. This one also has oil seeping around it. Obviously that's the valve cover, goes all the way around. It has seepage around the corner. There, and it goes all the way to that, dripping onto the exhaust. So obviously this is just half of the engine, cylinder 1, 2, 3, but there's another half under this whole thing. So that's what makes it a little more complicated, changing the 3 coils in the back and the 3 spark plugs. And obviously if you do the valve cover gasket, all this has to come out. All this firewall, strut brace, covers. So it's like a 5-6 hour job. Another thing, I think this car could really benefit from a tune-up. From an oil and filter change, from an air filter that sits right there, a cabin filter that sits right there. The fault code for the Vanos solenoids, well, for the Vanos mechanism really, these are the solenoids. There's one for the intake, one for the exhaust. I believe the top one is the intake and the bottom one is exhaust. I will have to check and make sure. This this is kind of hard to pinpoint exactly what is malfunctioning. From my experience, 9 out of 10, these solenoids, they get stuck because lack of oil changes. So you know, you do 10-15,000 miles on an oil change, a lot of grime is going to end up in it. So these solenoids will get stuck with such debris, and sometimes you'll find a mesh screen stuck in them. So before replacing 2 solenoids at 150 bucks a pop plus labor, what I would do is take them out, mark the intake and the exhaust. Right now only the exhaust is thrown in the fault code. Take them out, mark them, clean them, apply voltage to them, and like pulse them, make sure they click nice and loud while I'm cleaning them and blowing them off with the air compressed or compressed air. And then put the exhaust one instead of the intake one, and put the intake in the exhaust one's place. And this way, if the fault comes back and it moves to the top one, we know that that's a bad solenoid. If the fault stays on the exhaust side still, then there's a problem with the Vanos system, and that would be bad news. But the fact that the car's driving fine now, especially after the coil swap, makes me think that it's just a fluke, and that the solenoid just needs a cleaning and you know, a little activation to clear of any kind of debris that's causing it to stick. So anyway, long story short, just thought I'd make a video, let you know of what's going on here.